It's a big question, maybe the biggest. Can God truly be all-knowing and all-powerful? The Bible says he is, but life makes you wonder. You see a tragedy on the news. You face a personal struggle, you make a choice and wonder if it was ever really your choice at all. And the questions start to pile up. If God is all-powerful, why doesn't he stop the bad things? If he's all-knowing, are we just puppets playing out a script he already wrote? These aren't new questions. People have been wrestling with them for thousands of years. They are not easy questions with simple, tidy answers. They push at the very limits of what our minds can hold. But the Bible doesn't shy away from them. It gives us a picture of God that is vast, complex, and sometimes uncomfortable. It presents these two ideas, God's total power and total knowledge, as truths we have to hold at the same time. And maybe, just maybe, looking at how the Bible talks about them can help us find a way to live with the tension. Let's start with all-powerful. The fancy word is omnipotent. It means God can do anything. The Bible is full of examples. He speaks and a universe appears out of nothing. That's Genesis 1. He parts the sea with a word. That's the story of Exodus. He heals the sick, calms the storm, and raises the dead. The Gospels show Jesus doing this again and again. The picture is clear. God's power is not like our power. It's on a completely different scale. It has no physical limits. He doesn't get tired. He doesn't need tools. His will is his action. But then comes the classic puzzle. Can God make a rock so heavy that he can't lift it? It sounds like a clever trap. If you say yes, then he can't lift it, so he's not all-powerful. If you say no, then he can't make the rock, so he's not all-powerful. She's remembered great sacred consignment, but this question, it's like asking, can God make a square circle? Or can God create a married bachelor? The question itself is a logical contradiction. A square can't be a circle. A bachelor can't be married. Those things are nonsense. God's power isn't about the ability to do the logically impossible. It's about the ability to do anything that is actually possible. Making a nonsensical object isn't an act of power. Right? It's just a jumble of words. The Bible points to a different kind of limit on God's power. It's not an external limit, like a force stronger than him. It's an internal limit. It's his own character. The Bible says God cannot lie. It says he cannot be tempted by evil. It says he cannot deny himself. These aren't failures of his power. They are expressions of his perfect nature. His power doesn't operate in a vacuum. It flows from who he is. He is good. He is faithful, so he will never use his power to do something that contradicts his own goodness, justice, or faithfulness. So, when we say God is all-powerful, we don't mean he can do literally anything, including self-contradictory nonsense. We mean he has the power to accomplish his will. He has the power to do everything that is in harmony with his own character. No outside force can stop him. No task is too difficult for him. Creation, redemption, holding the universe together, it's all within his grasp. The power is absolute. But it is wielded by a character that is perfect, and that's a crucial distinction. His power isn't random or chaotic, it is purposeful. Now, let's move to the other side of the coin. All-knowing. Omniscient. This one feels even trickier. The Bible is just as clear about this. It says God knows everything. He knows the end from the beginning. He knows our thoughts before we think them. Psalm 139 is a stunning portrait of this. The writer says God knew him while he was being formed in his mother's womb. He says there's nowhere he can go to escape God's presence or his knowledge. God knows when we sit and when we rise. He knows the words on our tongue before we speak them. Prophecy is another huge piece of this. The Old Testament has hundreds of prophecies about the coming Messiah where he'd be born, how he'd live, how he'd die. Isaiah even names a foreign king, Cyrus, more than a century before he was born, predicting that Cyrus would be the one to let the Israelites return to their homeland. This isn't a vague horoscope, it's a specific name and a specific act known long before it happened. The Bible presents a God who doesn't just guess the future. He knows it, and this is where the real trouble starts for us. If God knows the future perfectly, what does that mean for our freedom? If God knew 1,000 years ago that I would choose to wear a blue shirt today, was that choice ever really mine? If the outcome is already known, isn't the process just a formality? It feels like we're actors in a play where the script has been written. The final scene is set, and we're just saying our lines. This is the great clash between divine sovereignty and human responsibility. The Bible, in a way that can be frustrating to our logical minds, affirms both. It says God is completely in control, and it says we are completely responsible for our choices. It holds those two ideas right next to each other and doesn't seem to feel the need to resolve the tension. People have tried to understand this in a few different ways. One way to think about it is to consider God's relationship with time. We are creatures of time. We live in a straight line. We have a past, a present, and an unknown future. We move forward 1 second at a time, but is God bound by time in the same way? The Bible seems to suggest he isn't. It says that for God, 1,000 years is like a day, and a day is like 1,000 years. He is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. This has led some to think of God as existing outside of time. Imagine a parade moving down a street. You are in the crowd. You can only see the part of the parade that is directly in front of you. You can remember the floats that have passed, and you can wonder about the ones that are still to come. Now, imagine someone watching that same parade from the top of a skyscraper. They can see the whole thing at once. They see the first float, the last float, and everything in between all at the same moment. The person in the skyscraper isn't causing the parade to happen. They aren't making the tuba player march or the clown wave. They are simply observing the whole event from a different perspective. Their knowledge of how the parade ends doesn't take away the freedom of the people marching in it. In this analogy, we are the people in the crowd, and God is the one on the skyscraper. He sees the whole timeline of our lives past, present, and future all at once. His knowledge of our future choices doesn't mean he forced those choices upon us. He just knows what we, in our freedom, will choose. His foreknowledge doesn't equal predestination in a robotic sense. He knows the choice you will freely make. Another way to think about it is that God's knowledge is so vast it includes all possibilities. He knows every possible choice you could make in any given situation, and he knows which of those possibilities you will, in fact, choose. He has given us a real measure of freedom, a real ability to make choices that have real consequences. But our freedom operates within the larger framework of his ultimate plan. Think of the story of Joseph in Genesis. His brothers, out of jealousy, sell him into slavery. That was their free, wicked choice. They were fully responsible for it. Joseph ends up in Egypt, suffers unjustly, but eventually rises to a position of great power. A famine strikes the land, and his brothers come to Egypt seeking food. They come face to face with the brother they betrayed. At the end of the story, Joseph tells them, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Look at what he says. He doesn't say, "You didn't really do it, God did." He affirms their evil intent. Their choice was real, their guilt was real, but at the same time, he says God had a bigger plan. God was working through their evil choices to bring about a good outcome. This is a mind-bending concept. It suggests that God can weave even our sinful, free choices into his ultimate good purpose, without erasing our responsibility for those choices. The Bible does this again with the crucifixion of Jesus. The book of Acts says Jesus was handed over by God's deliberate plan and foreknowledge, and yet it also says that the people who did it were wicked and responsible for crucifying him. Both are true at once. This doesn't solve the puzzle in a neat way, it deepens it. It tells us that God's sovereignty and our freedom are not enemies. They work together in a way we probably can't fully comprehend. The Bible is less concerned with giving us a philosophical flowchart and more concerned with showing us a God who is in control and humans who are accountable. And this brings us to the hardest question of all. It's the one that keeps people up at night. It's the one that can shatter faith. The problem of evil and suffering. If God is all-powerful, he has the ability to stop suffering. If he is all-knowing, he knows about all suffering. And if he is all-good, as the Bible claims, he should want to stop suffering. Yet suffering exists. Horrible, senseless, painful suffering. A child gets cancer. A natural disaster wipes out a town. A war devastates a nation. How can these things happen in a world ruled by an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-good God? There is no easy answer to this. Anyone who gives you a simple, pat answer is either dishonest or hasn't thought about it very deeply. The Bible doesn't offer a simple one-liner. Instead, it offers a story. A long, complex story. The story starts in a garden. Genesis describes a world that was created very good. There was no death, no pain, no suffering. God gave the first humans, Adam and Eve, a genuine choice. They could live in relationship with him, trusting and obeying him, or they could choose their own way. This choice had to be real for their love to be real. A robot programmed to say, "I love you," isn't really loving. Love requires the freedom to choose otherwise. They were given that freedom, and they chose to go their own way. They chose to distrust God and define good and evil for themselves. The Bible calls this sin, and the consequence of that choice was that the perfect world was broken. Death, disease, conflict, and pain entered the story. The suffering we see in the world, according to the biblical narrative, is not how things were meant to be. It's the result of a creation that is out of step with its creator. It's the consequence of human rebellion. So, in one sense, God is not the author of evil. Humanity, in its freedom, chose a path that led to it. But that still feels unsatisfying. Okay, so Adam and Eve messed up. Why am I paying the price? Why does a baby born today have to suffer because of a choice made thousands of years ago? And why doesn't God, with all his power, just step in and fix it? This is where the story of Job is so important. Well, Job was a good man. The Bible says he was blameless and upright. And then he loses everything. His children die. His wealth is destroyed. His body is covered in painful sores. His friends come and try to explain it. They tell him he must have done something wrong to deserve this. They try to fit his suffering into a neat little box of cause and effect. Job insists on his innocence. He doesn't have an answer, but he knows their simple formulas are wrong. Finally, at the end of the book, God shows up, and he doesn't give Job the answer he wants. He doesn't explain why Job suffered. Instead, he asks Job a series of questions. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Have you ever given orders to the morning? Do you know the laws of the heavens? God basically shows Job a glimpse of the sheer scale and complexity of the universe he runs. The point isn't to bully Job, it's to show him that his perspective is incredibly limited. There are things happening, purposes at work, that Job cannot possibly see or understand from his vantage point. Job's response is humility. He says, "Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know." He doesn't get an explanation, he gets an encounter with God. And somehow, that is enough. The story of Job teaches us that we may never know the specific why behind our suffering. It warns us against simple answers. It suggests that God's purposes are far beyond our ability to grasp. He may be allowing things for reasons that we, in our limited view, will never see. But the Bible's ultimate answer to the problem of suffering isn't a philosophical argument. It's a person. It's Jesus Christ. The Christian faith makes a staggering claim. It claims that God did not remain distant from our suffering. He entered into it. In Jesus, God became a human being. He lived a life that was filled with poverty, rejection, and betrayal. He experienced hunger and thirst and grief, and ultimately, he suffered one of the most brutal forms of execution ever devised, crucifixion. The cross is the central symbol of Christianity, and it is a symbol of unimaginable suffering. It shows God himself, in the person of his Son, experiencing the worst that humanity and a broken world can dish out. He didn't use his power to avoid pain, he embraced it. Why? The Bible says he did it to deal with the root cause of all suffering sin. He took the brokenness of the world onto himself in order to defeat it. This changes the question. The question is no longer, why does God allow suffering? The question becomes, what kind of God is this? Who is willing to suffer with us and for us? The Christian answer to suffering is not an explanation that makes the pain go away. It's the promise of a God who is with us in the pain. And it's the promise that suffering and death do not get the final word. The story doesn't end at the cross. It ends with the resurrection. Jesus defeated death. And he promises that one day he will return to make all things new. He will create a new heaven and a new earth where there will be no more crying, no more pain, no more death. So, how do we live with all of this? We have a God who is all-powerful, but allows evil for reasons we can't fully grasp. We have a God who is all-knowing, but gives us a freedom that is real. It feels like a paradox. It feels like a contradiction. Perhaps the problem is with our expectations. We want God to be simple. We want to be able to understand him the way we understand a math equation. We want him to fit inside the box of our own logic. But the God of the Bible is not simple, and he is vast, mysterious, and complex. Isaiah 55 says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." Maybe the goal isn't to solve the paradox. Maybe the goal is to trust the person at the heart of it. The Bible is not primarily a book of philosophy. It's a story of God's relationship with people. And relationships are not built on perfect understanding. They are built on trust. Abraham was asked to trust God when he was told to leave his home and go to a place he'd never seen. Moses was asked to trust God when he was told to confront the most powerful man in the world. Mary was asked to trust God when she was told she would give birth to the Son of God. None of them had all the answers. They had an invitation to trust. Living as a person of faith doesn't mean you have all the intellectual puzzles solved. It means choosing to trust that the one who holds all power and all knowledge is also good. It means believing that even when life doesn't make sense, he is still in control and he is still working out his good purpose. It means looking at the cross and believing that God understands our suffering because he has experienced it himself. And it means holding on to the hope that one day the story will end, not with questions and pain, but with restoration and peace. So, can God truly be all-knowing and all-powerful? The Bible's answer is a resounding yes. But it's a yes that comes with deep mystery. His power is exercised according to his perfect character. His knowledge coexists with our real freedom, and his goodness is most clearly seen not in the absence of suffering, but in his willingness to enter into it to save us. We are not asked to fully understand it. We are invited to believe it. We see a blurry picture. Faith is about trusting the one who sees it all clearly. And maybe that's enough.